All right, we're good.
Hey everyone, this is Heather Dodson, President-elect over at the Greensboro Regional Realtors Association.
And I'm Pam Webb, President-elect of High Point Regional Association of Realtors, and we hope you and your families are all doing well.
We understand this is a really difficult time for all of us, both personally and professionally. Both of our associations and the state association have been working nonstop to bring some clarity and guidance to all of our members.
We've been getting a lot of really good questions from all of you about the stay-at-home order, and we're meeting here today to answer many of your questions we've received over the past few days. Make sure you read the email both associations sent out last night for our interpretation of the order. That's the basis of our understanding for the questions we'll answer today.
Now we're going to jump in and just start discussing your questions. To help answer them, we have Nick Scarci, our Government Affairs Director for High Point and Greensboro here.
Hey guys.
Thanks for hopping on, Nick.
Of course.
Okay, first question. Do realtors need to follow the ordinance in the first place?
Yeah, it's a great question. So yeah, this is a legal order. So everybody who is conducting real estate in Guilford County, whether you live in Guilford County or whether you're coming in from one of our surrounding counties, you have to abide by this. NAR has backed this up, came out today, and they said that this is required by the Code of Ethics, that if you have any type of stay in place order or any type of restriction on real estate, you got to follow it. And also in the stay-at-home order, if you break this regulation, it's also technically a misdemeanor, and that's something that you would have to report to the North Carolina Real Estate Commission.
Great. So Nick, how long is this Guilford County order set to last?
So the Guilford County order runs until April 17th. And then at that point, they can either renew it or they cannot renew it. They have that option.
Okay, Nick, how long does the governor of North Carolina stay-at-home order last? And what is the difference between it and the Guilford County order?
Yeah, so that's another thing that's really been confusing a lot of people. So the governor's stay-at-home order will run through the 30th, the end of April. And at that point, again, he has the option to renew it or just drop it if things have really improved. He's feeling good about things. He doesn't have to keep it going. So really what's going to happen between the two of them is if the Guilford Counties keeps going, because it's the more strict ordinance, that's the one that's always going to take precedence. So if Guilford County renews that, then we would continue to fall under that. Now, of course, if the governor came in and brought something together that was more strict, then we would fall under that one. But for right now, we fall under Guilford County's set to expire on the 17th.
So what does this all mean for vacant properties? How do we handle those?
Yeah, that's a tough one. At this point in the language, it doesn't address vacant properties. So we're going to talk about a couple different scenarios coming up. But essentially, if the property owner is not there, it's going to be really hard to take photos. And again, we'll talk about this in a minute. And it might just be a sight unseen until somebody can actually get that, or somebody actually puts that offer and you have the executed contract.
Okay, so what do we do about open houses? Can we still do open houses? Can we still do showings?
So that's one of the things that they came down on pretty hard, and they said absolutely not, no open houses whatsoever. Now showings is a little bit of a different story. So under the update that just came out, you can do a showing, you can do 2 showings. However, you have to have an executed contract before you can have that showing. So there's a scenario here where that person's not going to be able to walk through the house before they're making an offer and going down that process. So that's going to be the first time they can go in to the property for a showing. And even the number of people are going to be restricted under this. So the buyer's agent can go in, the buyer, and then one other person. So you have to limit it to those 3 people. And then they can do a final walkthrough right before the closing, again, with those 3 people.
So no open houses. Sorry, Heather. So no open houses either, correct?
That's correct.
So what about E&O insurance? Should we worry about coverage there?
Yeah, so the first thing I would do is definitely reach out to your provider. and have the conversation with them and make sure that they're still providing it and all of that. One of the key changes that came out with this latest update is that real estate is considered essential under this. So that was one of the big restrictions that we were really concerned about before, because if it wasn't essential, there was a good chance the E&O insurance wouldn't cover it. But now that we are essential, it should be allowed. But again, I would consult with your provider on that one.
And how does this order affect property management and property managers?
Yeah, that's another difficult one because that's not really well outlined in here either. I would recommend that people stick under the guidelines that have already been put out there, that we're going to continue going through here. But if you can conduct your business under these guidelines as best you can, that would be my recommendation. So, in this case, I really don't think there's much of an opportunity for a showing before you can sell that, lease that property. So that's something you really have to take into consideration.
What about photos? Can we hire a photographer to take pictures of a listing?
Unfortunately not, and this is one of the things that really complicates this whole thing. So unless the way the statute is written, or the order rather is written, if you don't have somebody who lives in that unit taking the picture, or the home, the apartment, the structure, whatever it is, then you cannot hire a professional photographer to come in, and you yourself cannot go in to take those photos. And that can put people in a really difficult scenario, especially if you have a vacant property or somebody who may have already moved, is not in the area, maybe somebody who's elderly. It would really fall to that person who's in that unit, especially if you're talking about a home, to take those pictures. And the seller, even the person who owns it, cannot go out and hire a photographer themselves.
So how does this order affect Realtor members who cross county lines to do their work?
Yeah, this has been another really big cause for confusion, because all of the counties that touch Guilford County allow real estate as an essential service with very little to no recommendations or guidelines outside of just doing things under CDC guidelines, just things that are going to help people remain healthy and lower transmission of the virus. So at this point, it's looking like if you are conducting business in Guilford County, whether you live here or whether you live in one of the counties that abut us, then you're going to have to abide by our order. Anything that happens in the county will fall under this order. Now, if you're conducting business in Randolph, Rockingham, Alamance, Forsyth, Davidson, wherever else, none of those other counties that neighbor us have any type of order like this, any type of restriction. So, we will certainly keep you updated as time goes on. That can certainly change. But at this point, you can pretty much conduct business as usual, just following the health and safety guidelines that are already out there.
Great. So anything else in closing that you want to add?
This is something that as soon as we saw this language, we knew that this was going to be a problem. I think our hearts as association staff goes out to all of you who are directly affected by this. We've heard all kinds of stories about people already losing listings, and just some really hard scenarios, and just all the questions that people have. And, this is something that we've been working tirelessly on really since this first came out. It's been about a week now. And, like I said, this could easily continue through the 17th. But we are pushing very hard behind the scenes. I know it's not something that you see every day. And obviously we're all in lockdown, so you're not going to see us out and about working on this, but it's something that we're taking extremely seriously. This is priority 1, 2, and 3 for us. And I think all of our association staff, both at High Point, Greensboro, and at the state, are really dedicated to this, particularly on this Guilford County piece, because it is so restrictive. And we're continuing to reach out to our elected officials, and we will continue to do so to make sure that we can get you guys back up and running in the meantime. Now, for more specific questions, obviously a lot of this goes into some legal territory. NC Realtors, as a member benefit to you, it has their legal hotline. and I've talked to them a good bit, obviously just trying to interpret this. And Bill and Will are going to be standing by to take your answers, to take your questions and provide some really good answers. And that email address where you can reach them is legalhotline@ncrealtors.org. One more time, it's all one word, legalhotline@ncrealtors.org. And if you do have some more specific legal questions, they're awesome and they will help you through that. And that on our association level, we're going to continue to provide clarifications and push for the changes that we need to get you back up and running.
Thanks, Nick. We really appreciate all the information. And we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about some best practices that you can use during what everything is going on. To help us, we're going to have Peter Johnston join us from the GRRA staff. Peter, welcome. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, you're welcome. So Heather, why don't you walk us through some specifics outlined as best practices. So I'm going to read off the topic points, and if you and Peter both can help clarify them, just to help our fellow realtor members out there understand what's going on, please. So under the topic of client interviews, and when we're talking about buyer consultations and listing appointments, can you give us some best practices of how to handle those items, please?
Sure, I think I can talk about that. So everything really is going to have to go virtual. And there's a lot of tools that are out there that you can use, and a lot of them that are either free or at low cost to all of our members. The first ones are, how are you going to do a meeting? And there's quite a few different options out there, from FaceTime if you have Apple devices, to Google Hangouts if you're more of a Droid guy like me, to Zoom, which is what we're using right now to actually record this meeting, and they're all available to use, most of them at little or no cost to the agent. Would also like to take time to talk about the electronic signature process, and our members at no additional cost to them have access to zip forms through the State Association and the National Association of Realtors. So these forms that maybe you're having signed in person can now be done all electronically through zip forms and DocuSign for that matter. And then there's plenty of different tools that you can use through our MLS to not only create CMAs, to send to your clients, run searches to send to your clients. All of this information is available. I would suggest that all of our members go out and take a look at all the different apps that are available to them in the MLS dashboard when they first log in.
Okay, now what do we do about listing items, putting a listing on the market, like photos and measurements? I'm sure there's some best practices that we can use for those items as well.
Sure, and I know that a lot of our agents probably already do this, but when it comes to measuring a house, the best thing to do is hire an appraiser, because an appraiser is not necessarily, it's covered under a different portion of the guidelines for Guilford County, and would be able to go out and measure the home. In terms of photos, I'll piggyback off of what Nick said, which is that as long as the person lives in the house, you can get the photos from them, or lives in the condo or townhome. However, it does not seem like we can send out a professional photographer. That being said, it does not mean that you can then go and find the previous listing, or go out to Google Street View or something like that, or to ZillowTrulyARealtor.com and right-click Save As somebody else's photos, because that would still constitute a copyright violation, which would break MLS rules and would be against the law. A question that we've had about putting lock boxes and signs in the yard. That can be done by the agent as long as they sanitize everything and follow CDC guidelines and don't actually enter the property.
Thank you so much. So next topic, what do we do about showings, setting up showings for our sellers, setting up showings for our buyers?
I'll talk a little bit about that and maybe throw some to Heather. Showing Time has put out a lot of good information, a lot of good videos on how to get virtual showings into your scheduling information so that when a listing agent goes to make an appointment, or excuse me, a buyer's agent goes to make an appointment on your listing, instead of scheduling a time for the agent to go by the house and actually go in and look at it, they can see a electronic virtual tour that either the homeowner has taken or someone previously has taken. And the videos that they have out there are great. I would stress looking at the message of the day in the MLS, or we also have it posted on the GRRA website under our COVID-19 updates, to go and look at those videos that Showing Time's put out, because it makes it look really, really easy.
Yeah, so once under contract, you can have that initial showing on the property. So when that showing is happening, we do still want to stress everyone to follow the CDC guidelines. You know, when possible, obviously we would prefer the seller to leave the property. You know, a good thing is maybe have them sit in their car or go take a walk in the neighborhood. The less people that can come in contact with each other, the better. You know, if you have gloves available, you know, hand sanitizer, make sure you and your clients are both using those, booties as well. And then it's a good idea to, as a listing agent before, maybe ask the seller to open all the doors and the cabinets and turn on all the lights, so the agent and the buyer are touching less items throughout the property. And then, you know, if the client is there with you, maybe ask them to keep their hands in their pocket and just let you be the one to touch everything. And then re-sanitize when you leave. And keep your showings, you know, to as short as possible time that you can be in the property.
Thank you so much. So let's talk about, like, during the buyer's due diligence process. You know, one of the biggest things is about home inspections. How do we handle that? I didn't see that in the Gilbert County order, and I know there's been a lot of concern about that.
Right. So home inspectors are considered essential, so they can go and do a home inspection. But, you know, since the buyers are really only allowed those 2 showings, and we're typically going to do that right after under contract and then right before for a walkthrough before closing, we're going to maybe ask our inspectors to do a video summary after the inspection with the client and the agent. That way they can show anything that they need to show in, you know, on the video to the buyer. And then, you know, most inspectors give a great detailed report with pictures that they can go over the buyer and ask any questions after that.
I think that's a great idea. That video summary is a great idea. I didn't even think about that. So how are lenders handling appraisals during this time?
So appraisers are also considered essential to the real estate transaction. They are allowed. Most of the time we don't accompany the appraiser. So of course the buyer and the agent are not going to go. What we think could be a good thing to do is, if the seller has done any updates, you know, maybe they could send the appraiser a list of those items. The appraiser does have that before they go in or after they go in for the appraisal, just to kind of help them see what has been done to the property.
Okay. And what do we do about walkthroughs? You know, buyers are so anxious about getting into the house that they're purchasing, you know, the home of their dreams, and we don't want to squash any of their joy through this process. So how do we handle the walkthroughs that they're so anxious to do?
Well, again, you know, we're allowed the 2 showings. So most likely the second showing is going to be right before closing for the walkthrough. And again, it would be a good practice to ask the seller to, you know, open any doors, turn on lights, things like that. At that point, usually the seller's moved out, but if they haven't, you know, ask them to also leave the property. Use the CDC guidelines again, sanitize before you go in and come out of the property. Obviously stay 6 feet away, social distancing with your clients. Or, you know, let the clients go in the property first and come out, and then you go in the property and take a look as well. That way, you know, you're not crossing paths and getting close to another person. You know, if you have the booties, the gloves, the hand sanitizer, use all those, and, you know, allow as short as time as possible for the walkthrough.
Those are really good tips. So as we go on further through the process of all this and we get to the closing, what do we do about the actual closing? How do we handle that at the attorney's office? What do you think is proper protocol or the best practice for that?
Peter, do you want to talk about that, or you want me to?
I guess I can talk about that, sure. So a lot of the closing procedures can happen remotely, including a lot of the signatures of the documents. We have also heard that a lot of the attorneys who had been going away from using wiring to kind of go back to wiring their funds to the different parties involved because of the fact that it can be done remotely. Obviously, if your closing attorneys that you're using are going back to or are utilizing wiring capabilities, please make sure that you follow the proper guidelines and make sure that that information is being called in and not sent via email, because we all know about wire fraud and the issues that that has. The one thing that we did hear from the association attorney when we were on a call with this morning is the fact that North Carolina is not a state where remote notarization can take place. So on some level, especially the buyers are going to have to get the information that what they sign notarized by someone, which will have to be in person. So at that point in time, again, following CDC guidelines and wiping down everything after you're finished will be important.
Okay, those are great tips.
Actually, I'm going to jump in real quick. So the virtual notarizations, actually, that's something that may be changing in the very near future. So we will certainly keep you posted there.
Great, Nick. Thank you very much. So let's talk about, what do we do about open houses? I know that Nick said that we couldn't have open houses. So what are some workarounds to those marketing tools?
Right now, it's going to follow along the same lines as photography, which is it's going to have to be done by someone who resides in the residence. I can say that right now in Matrix, they have opened up 2 new options if you're going to put in an open house in Matrix, to a virtual open house for both open to the public or MLS wide. The big caveat with something like that is the person that was actually holding the camera or hosting the open house will actually have to live there and be capable of doing something like that, have the necessary tools in place, an iPad, a cell phone, something to that matter. We've heard some agents have started using Zoom with something like that, which is again what we're utilizing right now, which I think would be a great tool to use, but it would have to be someone that lives in the residence.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Now let's talk about when the contract forms, and we've got, as agents, we've got to do our duties to getting the money to the proper people. What do we do about delivering due diligence money and earnest money? How can we handle those as best practices?
Well, we want to utilize as many hands to touch it as possible, obviously. So maybe utilizing drop boxes at agents' offices, or, you know, dropping them off at the property for the payee that the check is going to. You know, if electronic delivery is allowed, you know, wiring the funds or using electronic delivery for them, so people don't have to be out and about or handling the checks and money that way.
Okay, those are great tips. Thank you. So is there anything else that you think of that I haven't covered when we're going over these best practice topics that we could add in to give our realtor members more information to help them on their day-to-day?
Yeah, I'd like to throw in a couple of points. First is that this is our first set of best practices, and we would love to hear from the members on questions that they have or things that they've encountered that they think might be good for the rest of the agents in the marketplace to hear and to update this information as we go along. And that actually goes, the same thing goes for MLS modifications to how we're inputting information into the system. That this is changing rapidly and we're trying to keep up. But there's new things that happen every day, and to keep the ideas and the requests coming, and we're trying to get those released out as quickly as possible.
I think and make sure you use all the CDC guidelines and the fair housing guidelines. And, you know, for anything virtually that you are doing with your clients, make sure you do get permission from them for that to be done as well.
Thank you, guys.
And that's it.
Thank you. This is great. This is great information. I hope that all of you who have watched us get clarification from any questions that you might have had. And if not, please reach out to us and let us know so that we can answer our questions. I think this sets a new precedence in the real estate industry for maybe what's proper protocol in the future. And we appreciate your time tonight. Thank you all.
Yeah, and from here, we'll certainly keep everyone posted when we have updates, and we're continually working with elected officials to improve the stay-at-home order. Until then, everyone stay safe. And I'm Heather Dodson, President-elect at GRRA.
And I'm Pam Webb, President-elect of High Point Association of Realtors. And again, thank you. We appreciate you watching us.